You've been lied to longer than you've been alive. The lie was wrapped in manners and stamped virtue, but in practice it was a training program trim away every edge that might offend, and call the leftover silence good character. From kindergarten onward, you were praised for sitting still, rewarded for apologizing before you even knew what you'd done, and applauded each time you made yourself smaller so someone else could feel larger. Somewhere along the way, you started confusing obedience with morality. When a woman's smile faded, your stomach dropped as if gravity itself changed. Her crossed arms felt like a courtroom verdict, her raised eyebrow, a guillotine. You scrambled to patch the mood, promised to do better, and misread that reflex as chivalry. But deep down, nature keeps score. And nature isn't sentimental. She knows the weak will always dress their surrender in glowing language. I'm just being considerate. I'm respecting her feelings. I'm a nice guy. In truth, it's fear humming behind those words. Fear in a Sunday suit. You weren't shattered by anyone's cruelty. You were shattered by your own starvation for approval. One compliment could rearrange your schedule. A withheld kiss could rewrite your principles. You sanded down your instincts, dulled your opinions, diluted your masculinity only to watch her drift away anyway. Or worse, she stayed and quietly lost respect because you'd shown her your backbone was negotiable. Most men fold at that point. They rename surrender as love, convince themselves they're keeping the peace, and hand over the keys to their identity. When the relationship sours, they come back. Not from strength, but from addiction. The same way a gambler returns to the table that ruined him. Pain is familiar. Self-respect feels foreign. Without a spine, misery is the only anchor they trust. Then one day she meets a different breed entirely. The man who doesn't flinch when warmth is withheld. He doesn't bargain his standards for affection, doesn't dance when silence is used as a weapon, doesn't break character when faced with emotional theater. Call him stoic, call him centered, whatever the label. He's immune to the tricks that once guaranteed her control. Why? Because he's already walked through abandonment and learned it can't kill him. He stared at the void, found no audience there, and chose to keep walking anyway. Solitude forged him. It never imprisoned him. He isn't reckless, just unbuyable. Love isn't a leash he wears, it's an invitation he offers. And an invitation can always be rescinded without shouting or spectacle. To her, that's terrifying. Not because he's dangerous, but because he's unprogrammable. He won't orbit her moods like a moon caught in foreign gravity. He's not desperate for validation, so her usual levers pouting, silence, conditional affection fail to move him. The script she's relied on for years suddenly reads like ancient code on a busted machine. Look around and you'll see why this shakes the ground. Modern culture doesn't respect the average man, it manages him. As long as he's useful, compliant, and predictable, he's allowed to occupy the corner of someone else's kingdom. Question the system and he's swapped out like a battery. Still, he keeps smiling for scraps of praise because he was taught that invisible pat on the head equals existence. Here's the truth. Nobody prints on motivational posters a man who can't stand on his own will kneel to anyone. That's why most relationships run on leverage, not reverence. There's an unspoken contract: keep me emotionally comfortable, and I'll keep the peace. Violate the terms, and affection disappears like Wi-Fi in a storm. Afraid of exile, most men race to reconnect. But the stoic man isn't afraid of exile. He already built a house there and found it sturdy. He'd rather dwell in solitude than share a crowded apartment with self-betrayal. He won't bend his words or shrink his presence to dodge a frown. His goal isn't approval, it's integrity, and integrity is non-negotiable. That alone unsettles her more than any raised voice could. She can't set the tempo with a sigh, can't summon attention by tightening a smile, can't curve his frame with guilt. In his calm gaze, she feels for the first time the possibility of being met as an equal rather than obeyed as a queen. That's exhilarating and frightening, because equality demands substance where manipulation once sufficed. The loudest lie circulating today claims that masculine strength equals cruelty, that boundaries equal abuse, that stoicism equals repression. Those narratives serve a single purpose: keep you dependent. A man who needs constant applause is easy to govern. A man who applauds himself is a wild card. The Stoic man sorted those lies long ago. He knows peace without power is just decorated submission. Compassion without clarity is hollow. And love that erodes self-respect is a slow suicide. So he doesn't join debates with irrationality, doesn't gift explanations to willful misunderstanding, and doesn't reward behavior that insults his soul. He simply exits quietly, completely. And when he leaves, a new kind of panic sets in. She's lost access to someone who never needed her in the first place. The usual economy of attention where small withdrawals provoke frantic deposits collapses overnight. For perhaps the first time, she must earn, not with surface charm, not with tears, not with temporary compliance, but with truth. Very few can deliver it, because truth costs ego, and ego guards its coins. She's used to being crowned on arrival, admired on credit, given loyalty up front. She expects men to auction their standards for a glimpse of possibility, but this man offers no throne. If he doesn't respect what he sees, he provides no applause. That lack of automatic worship rattles her compass, because it means she's no longer the gravitational center he orbits, only his mission. Yet paradoxically, that is the most sincere form of invitation. He's not searching for someone to rescue, he's open to someone who has rescued herself. His love, should it blossom, will ask more of her than any polished fantasy ever did. It won't demand she be perfect, but it will demand she be real. And so we arrive at the edge of a cliff. Either she rises or retreats. Most retreat. Rising means dismantling every hidden lever, every unspoken threat, every trick that once guaranteed control. It means meeting his gaze without costumes, a prospect scarier than rejection because it risks the one power she always relied on. But the cliff is there, and the invitation stands. She used to believe she held the power just by showing up, that if she looked the part, played soft, acted just wounded enough, any man would fall. And most did. They offered their time, their loyalty, their purpose, all without ever checking if she was worthy of it. They folded before being asked. They adjusted themselves without demand. They called it love, but it was fear in disguise. But not him. The Stoic man isn't flattered by her presence. He's not moved by performance. He doesn't react to every emotional swing as if it's a command. In fact, he doesn't react. He observes. And when she tries the same tricks that have always worked, she's met not with anger, not with chaos, but with stillness. She throws silence, he doesn't fill it. She withdraws affection, he doesn't chase. She tests his limits, he doesn't flinch. And that's what breaks the game, because this man isn't like the others. He doesn't need her attention to validate his worth. He doesn't live in orbit around her moods. He's already found something deeper than affection. He's found peace. Not comfort, not complacency, real peace, the kind that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. He's not here to be chosen. He's not here to impress. He is not performing in hopes of being accepted. He already accepted himself. And that is the death of the script. Now she has no tools left. The sighs don't work. The tears don't land. The pauses in her replies don't generate pursuit. She realizes she's no longer dealing with a man who responds to tension by trying harder. She's facing a man who doesn't see discomfort as something to fix, but as something to measure. If the discomfort reveals truth, he welcomes it. He has no tolerance for disrespect, not because he's insecure, but because he's evolved beyond the version of himself who did. He remembers the man who tolerated slights, ignored red flags, allowed his soul to be chipped away in exchange for fleeting intimacy. And that man is gone, buried, replaced. Now, when she plays games, he doesn't retaliate. He doesn't explain. He just removes himself. No argument, no drama, just a closed door and a silence she cannot manipulate. And it shakes her, because she's never met someone who doesn't flinch. She's never met someone whose self-image doesn't hinge on her smile. She's never met someone who doesn't ask to be seen, but who sees her so clearly that the mask can't hold. And for the first time, she has to ask herself a terrifying question. What do I offer a man who cannot be seduced? She was raised to believe beauty was enough, that being desirable was the same as being good, that femininity alone would win loyalty, regardless of her character. But this man doesn't chase beauty, he measures behavior. He doesn't worship her curves. He watches her conduct. She expected to be the gravitational force in the relationship, but she's met a man who only orbits truth, and truth doesn't flinch. Nietzsche once wrote, "The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. That's the Stoic man. He has wrestled with loneliness. He has walked the empty path most avoid. And he's discovered something powerful there, not sadness, but sovereignty. He no longer trades identity for connection. He would rather stand alone in clarity than be surrounded in compromise. And she feels it. She feels the pressure not from his words, but from his presence. He doesn't try to control her. He doesn't make ultimatums, but by simply existing at the level he does, he exposes every falsehood around him. He doesn't flatter her ego to keep her near. He doesn't smooth over her anxiety to feel safe. He holds the line and invites her to rise to it, not out of arrogance, not out of cruelty, but because anything less would be a betrayal of who he is. And that's what makes him dangerous, not to her safety, but to her illusions, because with this man, she has no leverage. She can't use absence as a threat, because he doesn't fear it. She can't use affection as a currency, because he won't pay for something that should be free. She can't shame him with silence, because he doesn't need noise to know who he is. He is not emotionally distant. He is emotionally disciplined. And for most women, that's uncharted territory. They're used to men who melt under pressure, who chase under stress, who shape-shift for affection. But the Stoic man does none of that. He doesn't dissolve in her storm. He doesn't reward tantrums. He doesn't mirror chaos. He simply stands. And in that standing, he asks the unspoken question that breaks most games. Are you real, or are you just rehearsed? Because he's not interested in fantasy. He's not interested in the role she plays to be loved. He wants what's behind it, and if there's nothing there, he walks away. He doesn't threaten. He doesn't punish. He doesn't need revenge. He simply exits. And that exit leaves her face to face with herself. No applause, no performance, no audience, just truth. He is not the man who tries to be enough for her. He is the man who knows he is enough. And now the question is whether she can match that. Whether she can meet him in the space where masks fall and real connection begins. And the truth most can't, because most haven't had to. They've been surrounded by men who compromise without being asked, who offer love as currency, who give themselves away to avoid the terror of standing alone. But not him. He doesn't sell. He doesn't plead, he doesn't audition, he offers. And if the offer is rejected, he retracts it not in anger, but in clarity. No explanations, no second chances, no waiting by the door. Just gone. Because he's not in it to win her. He's in it to remain himself. And that's what breaks her. Not because he's cruel, but because he's complete. Now she must decide rise or retreat. And that is the real moment of truth. This is the moment she never prepared for. She thought the real test would be whether she could attract him, whether he would chase, whether he would prove himself worthy of her time. But this man doesn't play that game. He's not here to impress, to compete, or to earn a place. He is the place. And now she stands at the threshold, realizing there's nothing to manipulate here. No script to follow. No fallback pattern to rely on. Because he's not pulled by seduction. He's not softened by tantrums. He's not moved by emotional theater. He simply watches, and in that stillness, something ancient returns accountability. She is not the gravity in this story anymore. He does not orbit her. He orbits his own truth. And if she doesn't move in alignment with it, she is not punished. But she is excluded. He doesn't need chaos to feel alive. He doesn't confuse drama for passion. He doesn't equate intensity with intimacy. In fact, the louder it gets, the quieter he becomes. Not out of fear, but out of principle. Because the stoic man doesn't argue with noise. He doesn't beg for peace. He is peace. And you can join him in that stillness or be left outside it. That's why she shakes, not because she's being rejected, but because she's being seen fully, without veil or costume, without the usual reflex of flattery. He sees her and he doesn't flinch. He notices the games disguised as emotion, the control masked as vulnerability, the chaos rebranded as passion, and where most men would lean in, trying to fix, trying to earn, trying to stay, he doesn't move. Because he's not interested in who she pretends to be. He wants the real thing, and if it's not there, he won't try to manufacture it. He's not cold, he's clear, and clarity is what most people fear. Because once you're seen, once the act dissolves what's left, what do you bring to a man who cannot be manipulated? That's the earthquake. She thought the power was in being wanted, but now she realizes the real power is in being unshakably yourself. And that power cannot be seduced. It can only be met. And now the question is hers. Can she match his standard without manipulation? Can she offer truth without tactics? Can she give from depth, not strategy? Because he won't lower himself to make her comfortable. He won't lie to soothe her fear. He won't water down his essence just to avoid conflict. He's not trying to be chosen. He's trying to remain intact. And that's the kind of man no one ever warned her about. Most men are too eager to be accepted, too willing to perform, too desperate to be liked. They hand over their crown just to sit at a table that was never meant for them. But not him. He doesn't trade. He offers. And when that offer is met with games, conditions, or disrespect, he retracts, silently, completely. No explanation, no back and forth, just absence. And it's that absence that screams the loudest. Because now she's alone, not abandoned. Alone with her untested self. No more audience, no more reactions to feed off. Just silence, and the echo of every move that once worked but now falls flat. This is what Enzi meant when he said, "The greatest danger in life is not pain, but comfort that numbs you to your own mediocrity." Most men bring comfort. This man brings pressure, not by yelling, not by controlling, but by existing so fully in his own alignment that anything false around him begins to crack. She feels it. The quiet weight of being in the presence of someone who doesn't need her to feel powerful, who doesn't require her permission to stand tall, who doesn't reward her fear just to keep her close. This man is not a pet, he's a mirror, and in his presence, her reflection shifts. Not because he changes her, but because he refuses to bend. And that refusal forces a choice. Rise or retreat, match or vanish, truth or tactic. There is no middle ground here, no halfway connection, no conditional love. Most relationships are built on silent threats. If you don't make me feel how I want to feel, I'll withhold affection. But the Stoic man doesn't accept those terms. He burns the contract the moment it's offered. He doesn't trade identity for warmth. He doesn't barter self-respect for closeness. He doesn't call obedience love. He has chosen something higher than approval. He has chosen himself. And that choice is the foundation of real power. Because you cannot call yourself free if you need constant validation to stay grounded. You cannot call yourself strong if your standards dissolve the moment someone disapproves. You cannot call yourself a man if you're emotionally supervised by someone else. The Stoic man has walked through the fire. He's known the version of himself who begged, who twisted, who overgave. And he killed that version, not in bitterness, but in rebirth. Now when she weeps to manipulate, he does not lean in. When she uses affection as bait, he does not bite. When she disappears to provoke panic, he simply continues. Not cold, not cruel, just consistent, just complete. And that more than any domination, more than any charm is what undoes her. She's never faced a man like this, not one who speaks over her, but one who does not budge for her. He is not here for her chaos. He is here for truth, and she feels it. The script falls apart, the patterns crumble, the ego retreats. And in that exposed space, she meets a question she cannot escape. What do I offer a man who cannot be seduced? That is the true reckoning. Not whether she can keep his attention, but whether she can be real when the performance ends. Most won't. Because to stand beside a man like this, you must become something more. Not more beautiful, more truthful, not more charming, more grounded. And that journey doesn't begin with love. It begins with loss. The loss of control, the loss of power games, the loss of the illusion that approval is the same as connection. That's why Stoic men are feared not because they're cruel, but because they force transformation, or they force distance. There is no in-between. And that is the paradox most men want access. The Stoic man guards, not with walls, but with standards. He doesn't chase, he summons, not with arrogance, but with alignment. And that's what makes him unforgettable. He is not here to be chosen. He is here to remain himself. And that, in the end, is the one thing no one can take from him.